Hello, Chiori-chan here, and welcome back to another tutorial on how to use Chiori-chan's web server. This is an amended tutorial on top of a previous set of tutorials I had did because I had actually neglected to talk about virtual hosts. This is actually a feature that is very important to the way the server works, and I don't really have a whole lot of information online about it yet. So let's get right into it. For starters, I just want to point out that this is for a later version, version 9.3.4. The previous tutorials were for version 9.2, which had some differences on how sites are done. If anybody noticed, there was an actual dedicated sites directory, and you would put your config in there. That is actually no longer the case. To configure a site, you actually now put it underneath the site directory for the web root. The thing you'll also notice here is that there has been a directory change in each of these sites. Now resources here, public root. This contains the main HTML files or whatever files you write. And then of course we have the SSL directory. Now I'm going to go over this in another tutorial, but straight up basically this directory contains your certificates directly for that site. We're going to start out by editing the config.yaml file, which stands for yet another makeup language. I would hope if you've gotten this far in the tutorials you at least understand what that is. I love it. It's a great way to write configuration files. Basically, the very bare minimums you need to define a site is simply the config file containing site ID and your site ID number, or name, which is what the server knows your site by. Just be sure that this equals the folder name. Again, might be something I'll change again in the future, but for the time being, this is how it's going to be done. So, to start this whole thing out, we're going to go ahead and we're going to launch the server. I already loaded up the main page here, so you can see that we are running on the default site here through the local host. The first thing that I'm going to do as an example here, this site basically has no real use right now, so I'm going to go ahead and create its first index file. And we're going to open that up, and I'm going to type the h1 header. Hello world. Save that and close it. We'll go back, and something I will show first is that you can actually, it's kind of still a buggy feature, but you can basically do the same thing you can do with Apache, where you type in the title and the site ID. By doing this, you explicitly tell the server that I wish to see the files of this. Again, it's a little buggy just like it is in Apache, but it's a good example here for this. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to stop the server. And I'm going to go over here and you're going to see, which of course it did not tell me, which usually it does. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Alright, so when the server shuts down, it saves its the sites, as you can see right here. So one of the first things it saves is the encryption key. I'm going to go over that more in another tutorial. And it also saves the web allowed origin, which is a JavaScript parameter in the head. Again, not something I'm going to go over right now. It's more for advanced users, but you can get the idea. Now, something you also did in prior versions is to define what host names your site ran on. You would actually define just domain, and then you would type in your host, like so. Now, something I recently enabled is the ability for you to define multiple host names per site. So to do this, we're going to actually just do domains, 2 more spaces. And I'm going to, I have already taken the liberty of mapping through my host file an example site. So that's example_local. You do that, and then 2 more spaces, and then you can put in your configuration options. I'm going to go ahead to save time here. We're going to define the subdomain web. So basically how it goes is domains, your top level domain, or second level, whatever your level domain you're at, and then your subdomain. And then of course there's some options you can put under subdomain. Again, this is where you can configure certain SSL configurations, but we're not going to do any of those, so just put a couple brackets in there and you're good. We'll go ahead and we'll load up this. And the first thing you'll notice once this loads is that the folder web will automatically load up right here. So now this is our subdomain. So I'm going to go ahead and type in example.local. And this is the example local page I made. So there we go. So, and then I'll display here, if I go to web.example.local, it shows you the directory listing is disallowed error. Now, the first thing that I want to point out is one of the things the server does is redirection of non-existent subdomains. To show what I mean here is we're going to go ahead and type in test. And since we never defined test as an existing subdomain, it auto redirected our post back at the local. This works safely with gets and posts, so it's very easy to use in case a URL changes on the server ever. Now, the one thing I want to also point out, this is a configuration option that does this. So I'll just show you real quick where that's at. If you go under the server config and then go under sites, you will see right here, redirect missing domains. I have that enabled to true. By default, it's false. But if you type in www, and of course it's non-existent, that's the same deal. Of course, that's not going to work. I don't have it in my host file. But basically, the server automatically redirects www to the root. And as you can see here, it says right here, redirecting non-existent subdomain tests to the root domain. So we know that worked out good. All right, so I'm going to go over real quick what other configuration options you have here. The first thing that's the most obvious is title. We're going to go ahead and type in example site. Oh yeah, I want to stop the server because, okay. So we're going to type in title, example site. By the way, I do recommend that you shouldn't modify configuration files unless the server is stopped. Because if you modify configuration files while the server is running and then you shut down, you run the risk of the server overriding any changes you made to those configuration files. I'm trying right now to work on a way that it won't do that to you. I have a couple ideas of somehow scanning the files before saving, etc., etc. Something might eventually be coming, but the point is I'm trying to, it could override changes. So anyways, getting back on topic here. So say you do also want to have www, you can put that here as such. Now, one of the many config options you can have besides title, you can also set up the sessions. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste a little session. So sessions. The first thing you can do is you can change the cookie name, what cookie the server actually uses. So if I open up my web, if it works, yeah, here we go. Open up the web tools right here and click on the cookies and then click on the view cookie information. You'll see here that the server used underscore WS session ID. So this right here allows you to change that. This allows you to define how long is that cookie good for. And then this allows you to set how long it's good for if somebody logs in and checks the checkbox that says remember me. The last real thing I need to cover here, which is a big one for sites, is domains. Or not domains, database. So I already have a bit of database config here that I've already done. So you basically do database, you set up the type. Now, of course, SQLite and H2 databases are supported. If you want to try to set those up, you can either contact me, or I might eventually have something published on how to do them. But for right now, the most easiest to set up is MySQL. You define the host, which I'm connecting to another server on my network. And then, of course, your username, password, and what database you want to use. Other options that exist in here is connection string, prefix, but of course that's all advanced stuff I'm not going to go over right now. So we'll go ahead and save that, and we'll relaunch the server. Now I'm going to go into the web root for our site here. I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to type in a code section here. And to get the connection, as you can see over here in the log, right after the example site loaded, the server successfully has made a connection to my SQL server. So to get the SQL server, you just simply type get SQL. Again, this is something that I can probably go more into detail later on how exactly the API works. But for now, we will just start with the basics. So the first thing you want to do is you can type in select. I've already taken the liberty of setting up a database and a table over here. So right here, you're going to type in table test. So that's the select. And then there's also execute to execute it, but if you don't type that and you go straight to something like map, it'll automatically output these results. So now we'll go right here, we'll refresh our local domain again. I know sometimes this can seem like it's running a little slow, but that tends to have to do with the fact that it's a fresh startup, because the server's got to initialize a lot of stuff. This is something that's been commonly I've seen in my server since the beginning, but just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Anyways, you can see here that we have 4 records, and all 4 records came out right here. You can actually do a var dump. I think it's var dump. Okay, yeah, that's the one. And then you can also wrap this in a pre if you want to make the data look a little pretty. So there you go. So if you want, so this will dump out that data. So you can see here we have 0, 0, 1, and 10. Now let's say I want to select one of the tables. So I'm just going to do this as a simple example. You would do where ID. Let's do ID is less than. So of course we're working with numbers here. Less than 2. So we'll go ahead and refresh again, and what you'll see is that only the first 3 results. The other one I can do is matches 10, and you'll see that it only returns the 10th result. So I'll go more over this API in the future, but that's a good example of what that does. Alright, so I got one last little thing I'm going to go over here. We're about approaching 15 minutes here, so let's try to make this quick. The very last thing is the fact that you can actually browse a particular site by IP address. Again, this is something that Apache can do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type in my local IP address on this computer. Of course, this is internal to my computer. It's not an external address, just for those out there that don't understand IPs. So as you can see, it loaded up the default site. We're going to stop the server. I'll just go ahead and hit that reload. That's not going to do much. And then the option that we're going to use is listen. Now under listen, all you have to do is do, this is a list, so you do dash and then that local address. So you save that, and then you load up the server, and you will see that when I go to type in, refresh this page, it will actually load up the example site. So it won't load up the default site, it'll load up the example site. Ta-da! So now what this allows you to do is, so if you do want to have a particular IP direct to a particular site, it can do that. I recommend try to keep your IPs dedicated to one site, because it will only select the first one it finds. So yeah, if you have multiple IPs on a server, you can browse through that one particular IP. I'm pretty sure, before we end this video, because the IP, this local IP, will go to default. The same is true for things like your local IP. So if I was to type in the local IP here, you could do things like the external IP is your default browsing address for virtual sites, while the local IP. And the same might even be true for domains, where if you use localhost as a domain, I believe that would work too. Again, these are kind of things I haven't really tested, but they're outside the scope of this tutorial. So yeah, sure enough, same deal. Local IP, and I believe localhost would also work. So anyways, I want to thank you everybody for joining me in on this tutorial. I hope I covered everything I can recall was important to virtual hosts, and I hope that these videos very much help people set up and run and start using my server. Again, I would love to start seeing people get involved, and I hope to see people around. So long.